I think I will take this as the moment to say good afternoon and welcome to everyone. I can see the numbers spinning as people are joining the Zoom room. It's absolutely wonderful to see you all. My name is Jane Davidson and I'm the current president of the DDCA, and I'm really delighted to welcome you to this national online forum, Power in the Present, Valuing the Arts Now. And I will be handing over to Samantha Bennett, who will be chairing the rest of the session. But I just wanted to begin with an acknowledgement, to acknowledge that we're all meeting on the unceded lands of the traditional owners, and wish to pay our respects to the elders past and present, and acknowledge any First Nations people in the Zoom room today, or all First Nations people in the Zoom room today. And I'm coming to you from the Bunwurrung lands of the Kulin Nations in Victoria. So I just want to say that acknowledgement, wish you all well, and I'm really looking forward to this exciting event. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Samantha Bennett. Thank you. Sam, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jane, and a very warm welcome from all of us at the DDCA. My name's Sam Bennett. I'm Professor of Music at the Australian National University and Treasurer of the DDCA. And I'd also like to welcome you from all of us who have joined from around the country to contribute to another of our national fora, Power in the Present, Valuing the Arts Now. I too would like to begin by acknowledging the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people whose unceded lands I join from today. I pay my respects to all Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples, their elders past and present, and extend those respects to any and all First Nations people joining us today. And as is customary for our DDCA Fora, we invite you all to acknowledge the lands from which you join in the chat. Power in the Present, Valuing the Arts Now is a response to a current imperative for recognition and celebration of arts research and practice nationally and extending internationally. We are all acutely cognizant of the current environmental and socio-political, the technological and economic climate in which we are working as tertiary educators, researchers and practitioners. Currently, there are several national policy consultations and frameworks in progress that will have significant impact on the arts in education and in practice. For example, the ARC has proposed a new direction for research evaluation with initial consultations on their planned Research Insights Capability Framework closing in late 2025. Arts and humanities researchers have maintained that quantitative approaches to evaluating our research will be insufficient, and this forum presents another opportunity for us to continue our conversations with the ARC around equitable and appropriate assessment methods in the evaluation of arts research. Consultations on the government's National Cultural Policy, REVIVE, are still open, and this presents another opportunity for us to contribute our expertise and shape the pillars and the principles of the new REVIVE policy, which is to be implemented from 2028. And so the aim of today's forum is to share some outstanding examples of arts projects undertaken by leading researchers and practitioners from around the sector. We will hear from each of them as to how the arts is integral to individual and collective well-being, how cultural and arts policy-making decisions structure and shape our democracy, how technologies, including AI, may be harnessed in artistic projects to create and disseminate new knowledges, and how the arts is a cultural determinant of health. These are all examples of how deeply embedded arts practice is in all aspects of society, and how the immeasurable value of the arts extends far beyond its economic benefits. So once we have heard from our guest speakers, we would like to draw upon the breadth and depth of experiential and practical expertise in this forum today by introducing some questions and some provocations for discussion in small breakout rooms. And this will give everyone here an opportunity to share their own experiences and insights, current examples of arts in action, and to share and reflect on engagement and impact strategies. In doing so, the aim is to collate these experiences into a collective position statement, and this statement will take a collaborative, front-footed and future-focused approach to communicating and articulating the value of the arts. Designed for use in the tertiary education, research and practice domains, our collective position statement will empower colleagues to amplify examples of best practice in arts research, articulate the breadth, depth and complexity of what we do, encourage colleagues to stay focused on the power of the arts in the present and in the future, and ultimately champion and celebrate the impact and influence the arts has on our lives, individually and collectively. And so I would now like to move to introduce the first of our 4 guests speaking today, and each of our guests will speak on their chosen topic for 10 minutes. And first of all, I would like to introduce Marianne Wobcke from Griffith University. Marianne Wobcke is an Indigenous midwife, registered nurse, artist and trauma support worker born in Mianjin with maternal connections to the Girramay people of North Queensland. She is a PhD candidate at Griffith University's Queensland Conservatorium and Queensland College of Art and Design, where her research advances Indigenous cultural and creative leadership for well-being. Marianne's practice-led research bridges arts, health, Indigenous knowledge systems and perinatal care, positioning creative practice as essential cultural and social infrastructure rather than a supplementary intervention. Her doctoral work has resulted in award-winning immersive and virtual reality artworks, including Perinatal Dreaming, Understanding Country, virtual reality experience, which explores birth as a relational, embodied, and culturally held process capable of interrupting cycles of intergenerational and perinatal trauma. In recognition of her pioneering contributions to community-engaged creative practice, she received the Australia Council's 2021 Ros Bauer Award for Community Arts and Cultural Development. So a very warm welcome to you, Marianne, and I will hand over to you.
Thank you, Sam. Is that screen coming up? No.
Marianne, you're sharing, but not your PowerPoint. So you might just need to choose the PowerPoint screen.
Okay. I'll just go back. Oh. Right. Sorry, everyone. I'm back. Sorry about that.
Would you like
Can everyone hear me?
We can hear you, Marianne, but we're seeing your emails. So would you like me to open up your PowerPoint from my end? I'll try and share from here.
Would you mind, please? Okay. That would be great. I've got that there.
You got it.
Thank you. Welcome to the perinatal, everybody. So thank you for this opportunity. And if you're willing, let's take a short journey together into another space, just beneath the surface of your brilliant analytical minds. So if it feels safe for you, I invite you to soften your gaze and bring your attention inwards. Or you may want to bring a gentle focus to the images projected onto your screen. So place your feet comfortably on the surface beneath you, feeling the support that is already there. Allow your body to settle and let go just a little, as much as you can for today. Of all the places in the world you could be right now, you have chosen to be here and that's significant. The first thing we do when we're born is take a breath. The second thing we do is give it away. Receiving and giving, giving and receiving. Allow your breath to find its own rhythm and balance, softening, releasing, and letting go as much as you can for today. I acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagara peoples of Meanjin, on whose land remains central to my life and work, whose enduring custodianship holds deep knowledge of country, culture, and creativity. Through the practices of Dadidi, deep listening, and Kanyini, responsibility to care, connect, and belong, I honour the knowledge systems and wisdom of First Peoples. I extend my respect to any Indigenous mob in our audience and to elders past and present. We are reminded we are on unceded lands. I honour that creative expression is not an added practice, but intrinsic to our human becoming. Creativity is not learned, it's inherent, woven through our physiological, emotional, and relational being. Long understood by First Peoples, creativity needs no validation. Like breath, it is essential and it sustains us. When we soften beneath the analytical mind into the quiet spaces of being and knowing, the impulse to create emerges as organic, relational, and undeniable. Held within country and within us, the impulse to create is not acquired, but remembered. It arises through our relationship with country, spiritually, biologically, and geographically. My research proposes we are conditioned into patterns of constant thinking, seeking, and doing, modes of survival shaped by habits. The mind becomes held in chronic vigilance, recycling familiar narratives that generate a predictable future. Creativity asks something different of us. It invites a reorientation, a slowing down, a release from surveillance into the imaginal. In the ecologies of rest, nourishment, and repair, the body recalibrates, the heart finds coherence. We begin to attune to something larger than ourselves, first held and shaped through the rhythm of the sacred maternal, and then expanding into alignment with the greater pulse of life. Within this living ecology of care, we co-create. Here the conditions emerge for imagining and embodying futures that align with more conscious and relational ways of being. Before we are asked again what the arts are worth, we might instead ask, what does it feel like to belong? To each other, to ourselves, to the creative living systems that sustain us. Perinatal dreaming emerges from this pause. We are reminded that creativity in traditional times was not an add-on to life, nor a luxury to be defended. It was rarely employed for sheer entertainment and never existed for profit. It is a deep biological, cultural, and ancestral capacity, one that allows individuals and communities to feel safe enough to imagine, to play, and to keep becoming. It is ignited at conception and held within the sacred amniotic space. It's carried through the initiation of birth into the vulnerable early years that follow. Yet when early ecologies of care are disrupted through increasingly interventionist obstetric practices, this innate creative capacity can be compromised and diminished at its source. In a world increasingly organised by urgency, extraction, and outcomes, Indigenous creative practice offers another tempo, one grounded in presence, attunement, and care. It invites us to stop explaining why creativity matters and instead remember how it works, quietly restoring coherence, strengthening trust, renewing the abundant collective life we already carry as an imprint within us. Within this framing, creative practice is not peripheral to well-being. It is constitutive of it. By centering Indigenous knowledge systems that understand creativity as inseparable from relational, cultural, and ecological well-being, we are not adding to the existing discourse, we are shifting its foundation. A power-based position emerges here, not one that defends the arts in relation to external measures of value, but one that asserts creative practice is essential infrastructure. It is foundational to how we care, how we relate, how we sustain life, individually and collectively. In this way, creative practice research is not reducible to impact metrics or instrumentalized outcomes. Its power lies in its capacity to hold complexity, to generate connection, and to enable transformation across multiple scales of experience. From the intimate, mother and infant, to the communal, families and communities, to the systemic and how we imagine and organize society itself. In this present moment, where the role of arts and universities more broadly is being questioned, what is at stake is not simply value, but orientation. How do we understand thinking, doing, and being in relation to our collective thriving? Indigenous creative practices offer a response. They remind us that knowledge is not separate from relationship, that creation is not separate from care, and that well-being is not separate from how we imagine and enact our futures together. Perinatal dreaming speaks into this space both as practice and proposition. It offers a way of understanding creative practice research as a living, culturally embedded ecology, one that shapes how we come into being with one another and how we sustain that becoming across generations. In contributing to this forum, I offer this as language towards a collective position statement. That creative practice research is not supplementary to social well-being, it is central to it. That the arts are not an optional domain of human activity, they are foundational to peaceful, responsive, and ethically grounded societies. And that Indigenous knowledge systems hold critical guidance for how we might reorientate towards this understanding in the present moment. Welcome back, everyone, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Marianne, for that wonderful presentation that's just given us so much to think about. And as you said at the end there, some incredible language and knowledge for the collective position statement. Some of the things that stuck with me about this presentation was around how creativity is inherent and doesn't need any validation, and that we need to stop explaining why creativity matters and start remembering how it works. And I think that's a really important point for us to carry forward. And you're absolutely right. This isn't something that's optional for us or supplementary to our lives. It's absolutely integral. It's within us, within our bodies and our lives, and how we share and how we care. So thank you so much for that incredibly thoughtful and wise contribution to our forum today. I would like to move on by introducing our second presenter, who is Justin O'Connor from Adelaide University. Is Justin here?
Yes, I'm under my nom de plume of Michael O'Connor, because a whole room of IT specialists couldn't change it back from Justin to Michael to Justin. So that is me.
Okay, well, a very warm welcome to you. Justin O'Connor joins us today from Adelaide University. Justin is a global cultural policy expert, providing many keynotes, reports, and articles for organisations involved in a wide range of cultural activities. He is Professor of Cultural Economy at Adelaide University and visiting professor at the School of Cultural Management at the Shanghai Jiao Tong University. And between 2012 to 2018, he was a member of the UNESCO Expert Facility supporting the 2005 Convention on the Protection and Promotion of Cultural Diversity. Justin recently published Culture is Not an Industry to wide acclaim, and previous to that, read Creative Culture and Modernity in China. He is currently working on a book, Joy Diversion, reflecting on the last 50 years of culture, democracy, and social change. So thank you very much for joining us, Justin, and I will hand over to you.
Great, thanks a lot. So cultural policy is in crisis, both as the sort of thing that we do, people in universities do. It's withering on the vine, if you like. It's really in crisis, but primarily because the actual object of its study is in crisis. So cultural policy is completely marginalized in public policy. It's we've got a current evaluation being undertaken right now, not evaluation, consultation being undertaken right now by an arts minister whose role as arts minister comes right at the bottom of a whole long list of other responsibilities, including, home affairs, etc., etc. So I don't think I would have to convince anybody in this room that cultural policy is marginalised, but also that the sector itself is in crisis. The cultural sector, the people who make and work in culture, they're suffering a decline of funding. This government's cut funding just like all the other governments have done. Declining funding. We've got increased precarity, a really inability to make a living, for artists and cultural workers, increasingly hard to make a living. Employment in that sector is way, way below the levels of employment in other sectors. It's in decline. But also we've got the rise of platforms and monopolies in the sector. So it's not just artists. We've got the rise of the platform capitalism, if you like, but we've got streaming services and also services like Ticketmaster and I was going to say One Nation, Live Nation, really dominating the whole ecosystem. And of course, we've got AI, which is just about on us. Another wave of devastation is going to come from that. So I use the analogy of cultural policy studies as theology. What it used to be quite a vibrant area in the 1990s, it's now been reduced to almost barely nothing in the Australian university system. Nobody talks about it. But as with theology, just because theology has declined as a discipline doesn't mean religion has. So we all know that 93%, one of those silly percentages, almost everybody engages in some form of cultural consumption or expression in some ways, or listen to music, reading, whatever. We know this. But the fact is, I was going to say, it's that whole area of thing is no longer the concern of cultural policy. It's not unregulated. It's actually regulated by markets and algorithms. Neither of those are actually determined by our own government. We've lost any form of digital sovereignty, and we've also lost any form of cultural sovereignty in that sense. So it's really in a mess, I think. And what I want to argue here, along the lines of power, is that culture is foundational to modern society, and we've heard the last speaker talking about that. And I've come at it from a more macro level, if you like. What I argue in the book is that culture is foundational. It's part of the social foundations. It's there with health, with education, social services, and essential infrastructure. That culture should be seen as part of that system, if you like. And those systems, those foundational systems, make the economy possible. The economy cannot exist without those systems. But of course, more fundamentally, society can't exist. We're talking about social reproduction. And a modern society cannot reproduce itself without these health, education, social services, etc. But they also, in the context of this talk, they also make the political possible. So the cultural, the existence of culture allows the political to exist and function properly. But I call it the pre-political, because this isn't about content. It's not about this kind of message embedded in culture or that message. It's actually about the capabilities we all have of engaging in culture. And I use that drawing on Amartya Sen, the Indian philosopher, I suppose, who talks about our need to develop capabilities. So we have here, we're not so much talking about rights, such as the right to expression or the right to creativity, but the right to have the capabilities to allow us to engage in these kind of things. So it's about how to constitute ourselves as active subjects in the cultural world, about understanding and cultivating our own creative knowledge, if you like, or creative abilities. And it's also about making judgments. We also gain the evaluative power to make judgments. So it's these capabilities that allow all of us to participate in a shared cultural world, and I would say shared political world. And these rights, this right or these capabilities require resources, and they require resources of education, but also of the ability to live in a house, without, as Hegel says, without give us food and shelter, and the kingdom of God will follow. We can't engage in these things if we don't have anywhere to live. We can't eat. We're struggling. We're hand to mouth. So these rights require material resources, and I would call that, in a very, very general sense, the cultural infrastructure. We need the institutions, the funding, the physical spaces, the educational structures to allow us to gain and exercise those capabilities. So I would call this a version of liberal collectivism. And I say liberal because the capabilities are about individuals' ability to make those judgments, but they've made judgments and the exercise of their own powers in a social context and with the public or the collective provision of the resources that enable them to do that. Now, we talk a lot, I'll just finish it. We talk a lot about the local and the communal in this context. And I think that's very important, really important. But we also need to talk about, if we're talking about politics, we have to talk about the public. And the public is not a communal space. It's a contested space, as it should be, as it always has been. It's a space of conflict, and it's a space of radically different opinions. But in some sense, what it provides is a shared space in which those contestations take place. And I want to talk about the culture's contribution to that space. And I don't think that the culture's contribution to that space isn't, as I say, a political art. A political art has its space. We talk about Gaza or other forms of, important political interventions, but I don't think that's its primary role. Really, the public sphere is a sphere of, I would say, reason. I would also say enlightened reason. It is about justifying what you say in forms of, in forms of reason that you would expect somebody else to accept. But what culture brings to that is a kind of an expanded reason. It's about really what we're talking about when we say culture in this sense. I would say art and culture. It's movement, it's images, it's sounds, it's rhythm, it's heightened poetic language. It's those things that go way beyond what any form of analytical reason. It's those things that really are about embedded knowledge. It's about where embodied knowledge. It's about a holistic and I would say also aesthetic, based on the senses, kind of knowledge of the world. And that embeds, surrounds what more the direct kind of political debates that we talk about when in the public sphere. And it's always been like that. To have a public sphere based on pure reason, on analytical kind of political reason, without the wider cultural capabilities of all the citizens participating in that thing, well, that's the experiment in which we're engaged now. Because what we have at the moment is a fragmented public sphere. There is no shared space, or decreasingly a shared space. And there is no shared cognitive or cultural infrastructure. We have shattered the cultural space into a million different fragments. And it's not only impossible to have communication between those fragments, it's deemed by people in government that it's not even important to have anything to say about our collective cultural life. It's not that this is, what our collective cultural life is access to a commodified space. It's between us and our credit card, and anything that collectively comes out of it is an aggregation of individual choice. And I'm saying that's really impoverished us, but it's also behind a lot of the cultural crisis that's going on at the moment. Because what we have left, once we've evacuated any acknowledgement of art and culture from our public life, which is basically what's happened, we're left with technocratic reason. Maybe we call it, last speaker called it analytical reason. Technocratic reason, absolutely about metrics. We will decide what is best for the public based on a complex mathematical machine which will reduce value to a number. That's where we are, even for art, as we all know from these ridiculous metrics that are being surrounding us at the moment. So I think what I would make a claim for is cultural policy is about actually reasserting our control over modern democracies. It's about reasserting the power of modern democracies and the expanded space of reason within that, and how culture provides a foundation, not direct. It's pre-political in the sense it's not about particular contents or particular political messages, but it provides that collective, shared cognitive and cultural infrastructure within which we can disagree and we can have those conversations, but without which we're at the war of all against all. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Justin, for your talk, which has given us quite a lot to think about, and again sort of reiterates the context in which we have all been working for some considerable time. There's quite a few ideas there that I think would be pertinent for us to take into the breakout rooms: how we understand and cultivate our creativity and our rights to harbour that creativity and to share it, and to what extent we rely on this kind of formalized cultural infrastructure, and how when that has been so fragmented, as you pointed out, how we can mobilize in terms of grassroots and community and togetherness and sharing of creativity that doesn't necessarily have to rely on those formal structures. Thank you very much again for your talk, and we will move on to our third speaker. So I would like to introduce Robert Ellis Walton, who joins us from the University of Melbourne. Robert Walton is an artist and director recognised with multiple awards for his work in theatre, screen, installation, writing, interactive art and research. He is an Australian Research Council DECRA Fellow at the University of Melbourne's Faculty of Fine Arts and Music. In this role, he leads the development of performances and artworks that explore the creative potential of ancient and emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence, automated intuition, theatre, virtual holograms, swarm robotics, standing stones, engineered bacterial bioluminescence, algorithmic ritual, MR, XR, storytelling, building information, model data, ambient computing, expanded photography, virtual production, and fire. Thank you very much, Robert, for joining us. And
thanks, Samantha. Great to be here.
Over to you.
Thank you. And I'll just get this going. Can you see that okay?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Robert.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that great introduction. I recognize it from somewhere. Maybe I wrote it once. It's great. I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung unceded land here at South Bank campus at the University of Melbourne. And I'd just like to say how much I enjoyed Marianne's perinatal dreaming. I saw that work in Brisbane the other year at was it ICEA or something like that? It was amazing and extraordinary work. And for what I'm about to say, Justin, please forgive me. I'm not an expert in the same way that you are in cultural policy, but I hope to bring my own perspective from a performance practice research. And I think there's some good crossovers there. I want to talk about irreducibility. I want to take it seriously because it names something the impact agenda cannot measure and the policy imagination cannot hold. It is also a word with a long contested history. Cultural economists have argued that pleading irreducibility disqualifies the arts from policy traction. If you cannot count it, you cannot ask for it. Belfiore has named the defensive instrumentalization that haunts our advocacy, and performance studies, my own discipline, long ago contested the claim that the live vanishes the moment it ends. I'm not unaware of any of this, and what I want to do today is test whether the irreducibility argument is sharpened against these critiques and still holds. In theatre, we have a phrase: the script is not the show. The script is the plan. The show is what happens when bodies, lights, audience, room, breath, accident and time meet and produce an event that no plan can fully predict. The show is irreducible to the script that calls it into being. I have argued repeatedly that the same is true for computer scripts, code. And my argument is not parochial to theatre. It describes how reality works, and the policy imagination has lost sight of it. We live in a scripted society, a world policed by prescribed roles, templates, metrics, recommendation engines, the silent choreography of platforms. The script of the social is more elaborate, more automated than at any point in our history, and we are increasingly asked to perform it faithfully. To say that arts research is irreducible is therefore not to say it is precious, it is to say something much stronger, that what arts research produces cannot be substituted, compressed, or made more efficient, because what it produces is not a thing. It is an event that resists becoming research data. The claim is not that the encounter cannot be measured. It can be described, theorized, and budgeted for. The claim is that it cannot be substituted. A video is not the show. Non-substitutability, not non-measurability. And to illustrate this, I want to walk through two of my works, one small and one large. And I'm just going to make sure that the sound doesn't come on. I think that one's quiet. In an empty studio at the VCA, a person stands alone in the dark. Their eyes adjust. Around them, slowly, deliberately, ancient standing stones begin to move. We told them nothing of robots, stones, or technology. We wanted to find out what people do when they meet something they have no category for. We call it first encounter dramaturgy. Over 130 people came through, participants in an experiment my collaborators and I ran with roboticists, archaeologists, and theatre artists. The stones are autonomous robotic vehicles in handmade carapaces, coordinated by swarm algorithms. We chose standing stones deliberately, humanity's oldest technology for prescribing where the body should stand. Ancient algorithmic ritual meeting the contemporary kind. And here's what happened. 55% of participants simultaneously recognized the technological nature of what they were meeting and attributed natural sentience, intention, even personality to it. They knew it was a machine. They believed it was alive. They held both without contradiction because the encounter itself produced a register of meaning where the contradiction did not need resolving. You can't get that from a survey or a paper or a description, including the one I'm giving you now. You only get that by being in the room when the stones are moving towards you. This is somebody making the stones, look. They're not really stones. This is what I mean by irreducible. Now, before we go on to the next example, let me name something that the robot stones make visible. And let me name two that what I'm about to call a performance ontology is not a Western theoretical discovery. The Bunurong and Wurundjeri people on whose land I'm coming to you today, and many other knowledge systems, have always understood ceremony, story, song, and country as irreducible. Western arts practice is, in part, recovering what it once helped suppress. In my work on algoritual, I trace ritual and algorithm to a shared Proto-Indo-European root, re, to reason, count, fit together. The same root gives us rite, algorithm, arithmetic, rhythm. All procedural, structured, working through that propels action by repetitive beat or measure. I call this shared activity rhythm, R-I-T-H-M, algorithmic ritual. Rhythm prescribes practice by creating a groove in which to act automatically, following simple rules that produce meaning in their doing. This matters because we live inside more rhythms than at any point in history. GPS, recommendation engines, algorithmic management, generative AI coordinating everything from creative briefs to clinical decisions. These are not metaphors for ritual. These are ritual, procedural enactments that produce meaning through the doing, with all the agent ambiguity ritual has always carried. I'm now going to move on to this piece. but I think it will try and play music, so we'll stop that. The heart, which we're just about to see a video of now, is a permanent artwork in the foyer of Melbourne Connect, a 10-metre form of brass droppers and LEDs, neon and bricks salvaged from the Royal Women's Hospital that once stood on the site. It launched in 2023 and is designed to run for 42 years. Thousands of sensors throughout the building feed live data into machine learning algorithms. Over time, the heart becomes accustomed to the building's daily rhythms. When something falls outside what it has learnt, the pulse quickens. I call this a slow AI artwork. AI stands for automated intuition. Because what these algorithms produce is not intelligence, it is habit, the slow accrual of sedimented experience that lets a body respond before it thinks. Melbourne Connect is a so-called smart building. It's automated systems designed to be invisible, offstage, seamless, the enchanted castle that cleans itself. We are increasingly asked to live and work inside this fantasy, an ambient rhythm that runs the show without anyone appearing to be on stage. The heart resists this. It refuses to become a dashboard, illustrating building usage. It remains strange, the heart of a giant alien that might be tuned into over a lifetime. So strange that it won't play its own video. So, two different works, two different scales. The dominant policy ontology, the one the impact agenda inherits, is a media ontology. It assumes the world is made of artifacts, paintings, books, films, files, things that sit still long enough to be counted. Arts research in this frame produces objects whose value is assessed by what they represent and how many consume them. Performance does not work that way. It is not a file or a document, it is the event itself. It leaves many traces, but not a single artifact. I'm not claiming that performance vanishes. That argument was made and contested decades ago. I'm claiming that the event changes the people in the room in ways the document cannot reproduce. What persists is not the performance, it is what the performance did. Performance is propelled by rhythms everywhere you look. My version of the word rhythms. The smart building, the algorithm, the impact agenda, the university. None of these are fixed. All of them are being made right now by us together. Every day they continue to operate, which means they can be remade. Every art form has its own version of this argument. But performance makes this argument paradigmatic because in performance, the irreducible is not a side effect of the work, it is the work. And the technique we have for producing it is rehearsal. We also actively develop new modes and methods for understanding performance, many of which new technologies enable. Sensor arrays, machine learning, biometric capture, agent-based simulation. These cannot reproduce the encounter, but they can illuminate it from angles that older methods could not reach. The encounter is an example of this double work. We built the encounter and we built the apparatus around it that lets us see what an encounter does. The methods serve the work and the work generates the methods. Rehearsal is what arts research actually is. It is the disciplined, patient, collective practice of remaking the rhythms we have inherited and bringing into being futures that would otherwise not arrive. Rehearsal is how we steer the unfolding of a small corner of the universe, something we work toward together in a room with our bodies. That is what universities are for. That is what arts research is for. This is not a defensive refusal of measurement. It is a positive account of what the work does, a performance ontology, a theory of rhythm, a practice of rehearsal. The argument is, don't measure us. It is, here is what we are for. We have to rehearse it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert, for another fantastic talk. And already we can see some links between your presentation and Marianne's work, in that ceremony and creativity and story and country are irreducible, and that again there were connections with Justin's work, in that the dominant policy ontology leans towards counting and metrics, and performance is not measured in this way, and we have to focus more on articulating the event and what it leaves for us. So thank you very much indeed for your contribution today. Last but by no means least, I'd like to introduce our fourth speaker. Naomi Sunderland joins us from Griffith University, and where she is director of the Creative Arts Research Institute, and she is also a member of the DDCA board. She is a proud descendant of the Wiradjuri First Nations people of Australia, alongside her mixed European heritage. Naomi has an expansive research and publishing record in arts, health, well-being, and First Nations social justice, with a particular focus on creative, anti-oppressive, and trauma-informed research approaches. Thank you very much, Naomi, for joining us today, and I will hand over to you.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you everyone for being here. It's been absolutely epic already, which is one of Marianne's favourite words and a word she often invokes. But thank you to everyone involved so far. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, I'm hoping that you can all see that.
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. So I'm going to be talking today about the outcomes of a national project that wound up last year, but we're still doing some work from, called the Remedy Project. And it was an ARC project, Discovery Indigenous, and we looked at First Nations musical practices as a cultural determinant of health. And something that really came through strongly in this research, which we already knew in terms of our lived experiences and our own opportunities to perform, record, write music with communities and with family members, that music is a naturally occurring strength and cultural force, and a form of cultural action in all of the communities that we worked with across Australia, Vanuatu and Aotearoa, New Zealand. But before I start sharing the story of what came out of that research, I just do want to invite everyone to slow down. Again, we've had a whirlwind tour of some absolutely incredible work that's been shared today. But just the way that Marianne opened up with the invitation to take a breath and then let that breath go, I invite you again to remember who you are, where you are, look outside, there is a world outside, and why we're here, here together. And thanks again to the organisers for everything that's been done to bring us together here. I also briefly, as always, want to acknowledge the Remedy Project team, and I won't go through individually just because of the limited time, but you can see them pictured there, and you can also see their names. I think the only person who's with us today from the team is Bridie. Thank you, dear sister, friend and colleague, for being here, and congratulations to you and everyone today who's gotten good news from the ARC. That's a bit of a teaser, everyone. You can work out what that means. I also acknowledge our amazing International First Nations Advisory Group, who are fundamental to this project. You can see them pictured there. And also the community research leaders across all of the different places that we worked in Australia and Vanuatu as well. So full details on all of those incredible colleagues can be found on our website and on our various outputs from this project. But what I'd like to do today is, rather than tell you about it, I'd like to invite you into a place of experiencing the 13 Elements framework, which is actually a new way of understanding how First Nations music works as a cultural determinant of health. It's called 13 Elements because there needed to be 13 elements. We worked across all of these different communities, different continents, different islands, and we ended up with 1,200 inductive or ground up ways of understanding the role of music in First Nations people's lives, well-being, health, and healing. And so we aim to come up with a story, not the story, just a story, one way of talking about how music has this function in terms of taking cultural action in our lives and in the world. So I invite you all to just drop into a place of deep listening. You don't need to do much. I'm going to lead you through this framework that resulted out of much collaboration and much creativity in this project. So feel free to have your cameras on or off. Move around. Don't stay still if you don't want to. Have a stretch. It's probably a good time to stand up. And yeah, just deeply listen, stay with the breath and see what you think. Here we go, everyone. We sat in circle, listening deeply. From Mbantua to the Kimberley to the east coast to Vanuatu, Aotearoa's echoes across the ocean. Over 1,200 themes rose from these yarns, these songs, these festivals, and these surveys. We asked, how do we honour this fullness without breaking it apart? So we turned to country, to spirit, to the images that live in the land and the sky, to the turtle shell that has 13 parts in the fresh water, to the flow of that water and fire, to the breath of the wind. And together we wove a framework, a story, a map of energies that are always already present in the ways First Nations music works in our lives, in our bodies, in our minds, in country, in families and communities, in and over time. The 13 Elements framework, a ground-up First Nations-led approach to show how music lives as medicine, as a cultural determinant, as action for health, well-being, and healing. The first element is spirit, ancestral connections, songs as ceremonies, listening that heals the inner self. The second is earth, grounding our bodies and memories. Songs are safe spaces, or they can be. Identity, rooted in country. The third is interconnectedness, a flower of belonging. Petals meeting at the centre. Kinship and family, community well-being through shared and sacred music. The fourth is water, important, nurturing, release, songs that cleanse grief and carry reconciliation. Irreducible. Fifth is thunder, shaking ground, bridging divides, cultural exchange that opens new healing space. And our sixth is fire, always fire, creative spark, transformation, songs that rebirth strength into confidence. The seventh is force, our political agency, our activism in melody, justice voiced in chorus. The eighth is shadow, complex feelings, pain and shame. It's not always light. We acknowledge so that healing can begin. And 9 is light. The sun shines, it warms in celebration, in joy, and gives us a sense of pride that uplifts our health and our collective identity. The 10th element is wind, where our songs carry our stories across the lands, across the waters, across the skies. It's media, it's radio, it's voices, whispers that spread well-being, potentially across time and space. And our 11th is Beautiful Moon, a reflection of ourselves and everything with a heartbeat, cycles of rest and renewal, and a calm that can restore balance. And the 12th is Time. And this is about tradition. It's about change as well. Memory that sustains identity, innovation that changes our birthright, songs that carry culture across generations and into new places. And 13 last is Ice, just because positives and strengths and flourishing are not always easily won. Sometimes we move through barriers. Sometimes the music brings silence. When connection freezes, it can teach us the cost of disconnection and the need for reconnection. And these elements are not separate from one another, they move together. One may start in shadow, find cleansing in water, and be rekindled and reborn by fire, all in one day. They show us that music is not only art, not only sound, not only performance, but it is healing. Again, I remind that this is a story, not the story. And we invite your voices and your feedback and your knowledge to help us bring these forward as a resource for valuing the arts now. Okay, everyone, thank you. As Marianne said, welcome back. Just to close off with, as we start getting ready to move into the breakout rooms, I wanted to offer a few open-ended questions just to let them linger in the air. So a key question that's come up for the Remedy Project team is, how can we support and expand these double quote naturally occurring cultural strengths and practices and not muck it up, like not get in the way, not intervene? How can we support creative and cultural remedies for society, for transformation, for adaptation, and for well-being and healing? And I think the other presentations today have shown some of the ways that we need to challenge what's currently happening. My next question for provocation is, if the arts and design sector in Australia were a body, how would we respond to heal and flourish? And I've been doing a lot of work on somatic therapies, and in the work Marianne and I and others do, there's this thing where you shake your body to release. How can we shake the body of the arts and cultural sector in Australia to release what's not serving us, to release the trauma of the past, to release the ways that we've embodied the oppression that surrounds us? And if the arts and design sector in Australia were a landscape, where would you be placed in that landscape? And how will you care for this country? Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Naomi, for such a wonderful presentation and for sharing the framework and, as you put it, the map of energies with us. And there was so much in there that we can take forward into these discussion groups and far beyond. So thank you very much indeed. I think we are now going to move to our discussion part of our forum. And just before we do that, these breakout rooms are going to be recorded, but for internal purposes. So we won't be publishing the discussion that takes place within the breakout rooms. These will serve as assistance for us at the board in the co-authorship of the position statement. So if there are any contributions that are used in the breakout room, we will be classing these as co-authorship, unless, of course, as a participant, you don't wish to contribute or would prefer that we did not include your contribution. That is absolutely fine, and you're more than welcome to let us know. Everybody will, of course, have the opportunity to revise and approve our consolidated work that we will circulate to you all once we are have concluded that process. So I will hand over to Mina, who I think will now split us into the groups for some discussion for about 20 minutes.